Good morning, Brandon and listeners.
Morning.
BroJ podcast, you're here,
You've made
and,
it.
and I'm here.
We're
Just
kind of barely here. So don't expect much from us, okay?
right, yeah. So, we. How are you this morning? I brushed my teeth at least,
Oh, there you go. That's at least a thing.
and then I drank like some of my energy drink, and it was like, this is sour.
And then it really hits you that it's a bad morning.
Mm-hmm. Whew,
Fair enough.
yeah, still got some of that weird
We're tang
toothpastey
to it.
tanginess. Yeah.
Fair
Ugh.
enough. You had a
That was
late night
something.
gaming.
Oh yes, I did. We played Helldivers 2 a lot, and oh my gosh, I'm loving that game so much. It's like, and Chris and I actually we stayed up like an extra hour after everyone got off. Like we like closed the game. We stayed up even like an extra hour just talking about Helldivers 2 and like,
Oh, that's
why do we
fun.
love it so much? Like,
That's
why is it
fun.
so much fun? Man.
Are you guys bouncing around the different difficulties or just kind of slowly trying to progress up the difficulties?
I've unlocked all of the difficulties, so I've played the hardest difficulty a few times. Um, Sometimes it was successful, sometimes it wasn't,
Fair.
and it kind of depends on who we're playing with and what our goal is. Like, there's
Mm.
these type of samples you can get. You can get like whatever they're called, common samples, rare samples, and then super samples, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like a type of currency for unlocking um,
Oh, okay.
different
Yeah.
upgrades to improve your stuff, right? And so sometimes we have lots of super samples, but we've run out of common samples. So one of the most efficient ways to get common samples is go down to the difficulty where it's easier, but also has a huge return on common samples. So we run around; it's real easy. Just make sure we can collect all of them,
Mm-hmm.
and then get out of there. So we've been jumping around like that a little bit, and it's still fun when you do that too. We've still like have lost a couple times doing that, so it's we
Well, yeah. Well,
yeah
it's fun to walk around like a little bit more of a badass, being able to kill everything
yeah
for sure. And so that's nice that they don't make the lower tier samples, I guess, obsolete after a while.
right yeah
Or at least that's what it seems like.
yeah yeah like you still need to go back and you still need to get all of the samples. It's a really actually now that you say that, it's really kind of almost well balanced across like how the cost of each of the samples.
Hmm.
Because even upgrading the highest tier stuff still requires so many common samples, so many rare samples, and super samples altogether. So you still need all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. But eventually it's going to get to the point right here soon where we don't need anything. We've unlocked everything.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. True.
but even then, it's like that's not even why I'm playing.
Mm-hmm.
I
Well, that's
feel
good.
like that's sort of like just a side thing to unlock stuff and improve my gear. And this is one of the things Chris and I were talking about last night was like, if they had a mode where you don't choose any of your loadout at all and it's just randomized and you just press a button that says random and you go down to the planet and you open up your backpack and see what random crap you got and you have to make it work.
Oh, yeah.
I would still love that so much because it's it's not about that. It's not about grinding for gear. It's about the actual gameplay. They've made the actual core gameplay just so much fun to play.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, yeah, I would totally still play that. Even if they like did something weird, how like seasons they reset your stuff, you got to play through the whole game again with the
Oh, yeah,
new
yeah.
gimmick and stuff. Like if they reset things or whatever, I think it wouldn't soil it for me. I would still be like, yeah, I'll just keep playing this. This is just so much fun. I'll try anything they throw at me, no matter
Well, that's
what.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of games do thrive on that concept of resetting everybody's progress after X amount of time. Some of them really, really thrive on that because they do enjoy like the grind and the build up through the different things of like re-getting gear or
Yeah.
abilities or whatever it is.
Yeah, so like Diablo 4, I guess they're trying really, really hard to revive it. And
Okay.
they've got some big plans for season 4, which it starts in like April or something like that. So we've still got another
Hmm.
month ish, a week or two. And they're like revamping everything, all of the systems, and like especially the gear. They're focusing a lot on the gear because before, one of the problems was there was aspects on the gear that were very super hyper specific. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can only do like a tiny 0.05% more damage, but only to this type of monster. And
Oh, it
it's
was
like
way too
only to a
specific to the monster
type of
type.
monster. Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
And it was like it was so hard. You always ended up with like so much gear and like stuff on your gear that like only was relevant every now and then. And so
Yeah.
you end up with this huge amount of gear collected that you could trade in and out, like in certain circumstances, like you're going to a specific dungeon, specific difficulty. Okay, I need to switch over to this loadout. And that's one of the bigger reasons why people are complaining about the storage space. Because they're like, well, we have so much
Okay.
gear, we don't have a place to store it. So
Yeah.
one of their solutions is not giving more storage space, but just improving their gear system. They're like, okay, people don't need to be hanging on to all this gear, actually. Let's just fix that.
Hmm.
And so that's what they're promising to do.
We'll
Um,
see if they do it in the right way, I guess.
yeah. And that, I don't think that was my problem with the game at all either, though. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I, I don't know. I think there was way, way, way more stuff wrong with it than that. And they're just, trying to soothe the loudest voices.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I mean, it just felt fundamentally not a Diablo game.
What did you like about the original Diablo games? Like, what parts of it were the things that you liked doing them or liked about them the most?
Hmm.
Because I never got into. I mean, I played Diablo 3, but I never really fell in love with the genre or the games. I was a
It
little bit too young when the original ones came out for me to really get really into them and fall in love with them. And so I played with them with you guys, but I never really fell in love with the genre or the story by any means.
right. I think there was a few times where there was a couple things. One of them was like the difficulty. Like
Like the way it ramped up.
it just always seemed very, very hard. And when you died, it
Okay.
was very punishing. Like you dropped everything and you had to go back to your body and
Pick it
get your
back up.
gear back. Yeah.
A death
And
meant something.
yeah, dying meant something, and like it was very challenging. Um, you had to be really careful. Anything could end up killing you. You had to be like just cautious and strategic and careful as you're going through a dungeon, like it was a real big dangerous dungeon. And then Diablo 3 sort of was completely. I even felt like Diablo 3 wasn't even really a Diablo game.
Mm-hmm.
It was a whole new different thing. It sucked at first, and it wasn't until after they did like the expansion,
The
whatever,
Reaper one.
the Reaper one, yeah, that like they fixed a lot of the weird problems in it. But even then, it was like, okay, they made it fun, but it's still not a Diablo game.
Okay, yeah, fair.
They made a new game that this it's fun, it has its own things to it, but it still never felt like a true Diablo game. And I think they've completely lost sight of what that means. And so
Mm,
calling Diablo 4 a Diablo game, it's like just accept the fact that you're making a Lilith game. Like it's
okay.
not Diablo. Diablo himself is only mentioned like once or twice in text, and you never
Oh,
see him.
really?
You never fight him or anything like that. Yeah, and it's just like just accept that you've made a game that's a Lilith game, and it doesn't even play like a Diablo game. And so like you keep trying to go back to your Diablo fan base, but you've gone so far off. Just accept that of what you've done.
So do you think it would have been better accepted to be a spin-off of the Diablo world, but its own game, or do you think it should have been
Yes.
its own completely separate thing?
Yes, absolutely. I think it should. Yeah.
It should be a spin-off. Okay,
That's what I think.
fair enough.
Um, I don't know. They think that just because it's in the same universe, they gotta like try to keep trying to make it the same thing. But
Yeah,
well, like okay, look at the Mario games, right? They're all sort of like, maybe that's a bad example, or maybe it's the right example to prove me wrong.
I mean,
Because like they're all
they're all,
Mario,
but they're
but
all,
they're all vastly different games.
yeah, they all have
Um,
a similar core mechanic, so to
right.
speak.
You jump on things to kill them. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and you're like moving throughout a level trying to progress to the end, and they just kind of
Yeah.
slowly introduced abilities.
Yeah. That's actually almost what Diablo 4 feels like. It's like, okay, maybe this is the same world, but to me, it just doesn't even feel like the same game. Even
Yeah,
though they're like, oh, this is an action RPG and you're going through dungeons. But it's like, yeah, but you ruined the core feeling of the game, the feeling of playing it, of like every dungeon mattered. Whereas in Diablo 4, there's like 3 bosses. And like it's randomized which when you go through a dungeon, which of the 3 bosses you get. So like after you play through 6 of them, you've seen a lot of the bosses multiple times. And that's like
mm,
only a portion of the game. So it's like it's so stupid repetitive and meaningless. They made everything meaningless. The dungeons and fighting. Whereas in the early Diablo games, Diablo 2, like everything was so unique and dangerous. You had no idea what you were gonna get throughout the entire game. You
because
didn't know what you're
everything
gonna
was
come
different
across.
rather than kind of reusing the same assets or
Yeah, pretty much.
like
Yeah.
path to get to something, so to
Right,
speak.
yeah. Uh-huh.
Hmm. No, I do
So
feel like a
it
lot of games do that, trying to think that fixes replayability at like the end game, so to speak. But I guess it does kind of just ruin the not ruin, but well, maybe ruin the mid game experience a little bit.
yeah, you're right, yeah. Because, like, I remember playing Diablo 3 where, like, there was a specific set of gear I wanted to get. And it wasn't until after I beat the game a couple times, got to the higher difficulties. Um, we've gone through whatever there's like the extra dimension you can go through too. I forgot what that thing was called, but like you grind
Hmm.
through that several times. And it wasn't until like we had all our fun. We beat it so many times. We had a lot of fun. And then finally I like got the last set of my gear. I'm like, "Hey, I finally have the full set of my gear that I was going for, but we're done playing now. There's nothing left to use it on."
I feel like a lot of games suffer from that. A lot
Yeah.
of games, like as soon as you get the thing you've been working so hard to get and to quote unquote make the game fun, you
Uh-huh.
suddenly are out of things to do with it.
Yeah, there's nothing left to do with it. Uh,
I feel like a lot of MMOs suffer from that as well.
mhm.
Like the thing that you need to beat the thing and to do the thing is the reward from doing the thing.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just like, well, I guess you kind of make it fun to solve this like hard puzzle for like the really dedicated top tier players, maybe, because they're trying to figure out how to do that thing now without the thing you need. But like for everybody else, it's like, well, now I've done it and I finally got the thing. I guess I can do this again for no
Yeah,
real
like
reason. But
right. Why do I need to do it again? Oh, to
or
to
like,
prove that how much better you are now that you have the thing.
yeah, or like all the meta things are locked behind the things you need the meta thing to do.
Yes.
Like I think of a Destiny suffers a little bit from this,
Mm.
where like the weapon that everyone recommends you use to complete the dungeon or the raid is the reward
For
from
completing that.
the dungeon or the raid. It's like, well, that's just dumb. All the top tier, I mean, the things you get from the raid should be top tier and really good, but there should be also some really good things that are not from the raid or the dungeon that
Mm.
work really well. And I don't know if that's just like falling into the trap of watching YouTube videos or something like that where they rant and rave about a meta that doesn't actually exist and they just are ranting and raving about the new thing they got. But I don't know.
The one thing I really liked about Firefall, which was probably my favorite game of
Mm-hmm.
all time, was part of it was like the gear. Like the gun I had at the very end was the gun I started with. But
Mm-hmm.
like it
Okay.
has you craft modules that improve it and you can customize it and change things about it by adding modules. And that Noida game you played reminded me of it, where like you have a
Oh yeah.
wand, but you can switch things in and out of it to sort of customize your wand depending on what you want it to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I just loved that. Like I had my gun, I always knew exactly how it worked. I got it near
Yeah.
the beginning. I chose at the very beginning of the game, like, okay, this is the play style I want. This is how I'm going to enjoy the game by playing this way with this weapon. Now
It was a
let
class
it
assigned weapon essentially.
sort of, yeah. There was a couple weapons you could get for your class, and I just tried them and picked one of them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then it grew with me throughout the game because I was able to craft things to modify it and improve it to make it more powerful to suit the next difficulty and stuff like that. And like one of the problems that games like this, um, action RPGs and stuff have is like you're like, okay, you start off, you're like, okay, yeah, no, this is a cool bow. This is working for me, and it like works through a couple levels, and then like it stops working, and then you've got to find a completely different weapon. You're like, okay, well, this is a longbow, and this one's, oh, this takes up two weapon slots, and
Mm, you're having to completely change your
now I've got to
build.
change my whole build and how I was playing, and I'm only at level 10 now, and now I've got to change my whole concept of how I'm enjoying this game, and so throughout the whole game, you're changing everything you're doing, even though you already made up your mind there was a specific way you wanted to enjoy the game at the beginning. And it's like, to me, I'll get halfway through and go, you know what? This isn't even the same gear I started with. This doesn't even play the same way. It doesn't feel like how I want it. And then I spend the rest of the time like figuring out, okay, how do I get back to where I was? And like
Yeah.
this whole mini game of figuring out gear because they don't know how to make it consistent. And like,
Yeah, but I think sometimes the point of that and the argument you'd get against that is that the regular game, like on games like Diablo, that whole playing through the campaign is the part where you just play through the different types of gear to see what they're all like. And you don't actually get to a point of the game where you're deciding on a piece of gear until that end game content where you're like looping through the nightmares and stuff like that.
oof. See, right,
which is
okay.
which is different than maybe like the earlier Diablo games. But I think like the point of that system is that you don't choose your loadout and your gear that you're kind of sticking with until you get to that
Oof. And
end
that's
game
rough because
content.
then we're talking. Yes, I think that is exactly how it's working. But and then it's like, well, then that's tons of hours to me wasted being forced to experiment with my loadout instead
Hmm.
of instead of enjoying the game. It's like
Yeah,
you're not allowed to enjoy the game until you get to the end where you finally have your dream loadout. And it's like,
yeah,
well, what was this last 20 hours about?
yeah.
You waste
And
20 hours
then
in a tutorial state trying to get to the point where you can enjoy the game.
and then you have a new system that has,
Yeah.
in my opinion, that has come up recently called New Game Plus. Have you heard about this?
Ugh. Yeah, I've heard it called that. Ugh.
But it's essentially the thing you're talking about of like you waste all the hours, you get the gear you want, you get the end game content, but then you can do New Game Plus and essentially play the game with your end game gear, like how it theoretically should have been played
Should have
from the
been.
beginning,
Right. Yeah.
which is an interesting
And and
concept.
and
I don't
like you're
know.
saying, maybe that's to try to make things replayable. They're trying
Yeah,
to keep retention.
I think the whole concept is to keep you playing the game longer.
Yeah. And
Because like in something like Diablo 2, was there a reason to go back to the game after you completed the campaign?
I don't remember that specifically, honestly. I think I only played it through like once or twice. I don't think I beat it the first time because like I don't remember, but
But
I
new
remember
games, not with the
giving
same
up.
character.
Right. Yeah, entirely new game, new character, try it again and then beat it. But it took me it felt like a long time as a kid. But like I
Yeah,
beat
see,
it and it was
I
fun
don't
and
think
that
that
was it.
model. I don't think that model hardly exists anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Playing through a game, beating it, and then if you play it again, you start a new character. I think that model is slowly drifting further and further away in the game space. It's very much so you play through the game, and with that same character, now what other things can you do in the game?
Yeah, they just want to keep you playing the same game constantly. And yeah, they've moved away from the idea of like we made a game completely. There's the complete package. You own the CD, and that's it. The end.
Yeah.
Except for the tweet we recently got from the Baldur's Gate 3 guys. I think it was a tweet
Was it?
where they essentially said, "Hey, we've the game's done. Bye. We're gonna move on to our next project. If there's bugs and stuff, sure we'll go back to it and fix the bugs and things. But like the characters, all the IP of like the characters themselves and what happens to their lives and future Baldur's Gate games and like other D&D lore and stuff, Wizards of the Coast own that now. We've handed it over. We passed the torch.
That was a
We're
little
done
bit
with that
forced,
game.
though. That was forced.
Yeah, it's. I think that there probably was something forced
There was a
about
bit.
that.
It was Hasbro bought them and fired the creative team,
Oh, is that what happened?
and basically forced them to like end the content here. You're not making anymore. So like the main guy that like jumped onto the
I didn't
studio
hear
and
that
brought
part.
his creative team with him,
Mm.
Hasbro, for reasons that I don't understand, essentially fired his entire team, the creative team that was working with him. And that's just, I could be off on some of those details because it was just a couple of articles I
Okay.
saw here and there, but that's what I've heard about it. And that the decision of no more Baldur's Gate content was not chosen; it was forced.
Oh.
It was not a choice by anybody at really with working with Baldur's Gate. They just were like, they had to be like, well, I guess it ends here. Sorry, no more content.
Dang. I didn't know that.
Because I think there was originally plans for like another act or something like that.
Oh. I still need to beat that. I'm like near the very, very end.
Oh yeah.
Hell's Divers 3 is taking over my life. I need to go
Oh,
back and
fair.
finish the last act there. But like I was like, this makes sense for the game to be in a complete state. And then from the movie, I figured they'd probably like start working on Baldur's Gate 4 or something like that because they did such a
Mm.
good job. But yeah, if they were like, if Hasbro went in and ruined their creative team, they've ruined what they had, and
From
it's
what I
gone
understand,
now. It's gone.
that's what's happened.
Dang
Yeah.
it! Oh
But it's
no!
also the fact that it's a complete and solid game stems from the fact that it's a very, I mean, it's technically multiplayer, but a very single player, not online game, which is, I also think, a little bit more rare these days. But it was nice to
Yeah,
see a successful version of that come out and show studios that, like, hey, you can
it's
still make this
possible.
kind of game and still make
Yeah,
money.
it, and it works, and people will buy it and play it, and it's not like it's something we don't want anymore. So for games to be like forcing themselves to be this weird live service sort of thing
Hmm.
because they think that's the only way. It's wrong. I mean, it works for some games like Helldivers 2. It's fantastic, but other
Oh
games
yeah,
it's
it
just
has its
not right
place
for
for
their
sure.
game. And some games should be like that's just how Diablo 1 and 2 were, and I think that was part of what made it good. Even Diablo 2 had some multiplayer. I think even Diablo 1 had a little bit of multiplayer. Um, but it was weird and broken. But yeah, I think that I forgot what I was saying. I'm really tired. I need more.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I think it's weird when companies take a game that was inherently really good at like the single core single player completed game style and try to morph it into this like games as a service, kind of like
Ugh,
Diablo did. I
yeah.
I think it ends up. I'm trying to think of an example where it worked well. I'm sure there is something where it worked well, but for the most part, it's like at that point, just make a different game and let that game either exist as it was or continue it the way it was and do your like play as a service game as like a spin-off or just completely different game.
And I think that they had another problem though, like with Diablo 3 and Diablo 4. It definitely made the multiplayer part a stronger aspect of it,
Mm-hmm.
almost to the point where it almost relied on it. But I don't think they realized what it felt like to play with other people in those games, because there wasn't like a true class reliant system to it. Like it didn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we needed a tank or we needed a healer or anything
Yeah.
like that. It was just we all had our own weird builds. It didn't matter what they were. We could jump in together. But then what happened was somebody's was obviously way more efficient than everyone else's, and they would just like zip through the whole
Wipe.
map, and anything even near them just got dusted. And like,
Well, it turns into a race as to who can clear everything on the map the fastest. It
yeah,
turns into a sprinting match across the levels, is what it felt like in Diablo 3.
yeah, exactly, yeah. And so
Every
like,
single build eventually morphed into, okay, I press these three buttons and then I walk around and everything dies.
hmm,
Every build turned into that.
oh yeah, it felt good though.
I mean,
Like
it
my
felt
last
good,
build,
but
I had like this thing where like things would get sucked into me if they were nearby. They suck in, and then my little bone tornado would just obliterate them, and then they explode out. So it was like boom. It was like this cool implosion explosion, and I just like zip around, and everything would just get nuked. Like it felt good for me, but it
oh
wasn't
yeah.
conducive to playing with anyone else.
Mm-mm.
It wasn't like, so the idea that they went to live service to make it easier and better to play with other people and that sort of thing. The core mechanics of the game, once you get to that point, were not conducive to co-op play.
Mm-mm.
It like, so they contradicted each other. So it didn't feel like the kind of game that needed a live service. So they just went for it just
Yeah.
because that was the thing to do.
Yeah. No, that's
And it feels
fair.
that way in Diablo 4 too. Anytime I've tried playing, so now it's like I don't know if I want to play with somebody else because it's like it's not the same experience. I'm trying desperately to get back to that challenging experience where I don't know what's going on in the dungeon, trying to make it feel cool and unique. And if someone else is in there with me, sometimes they'll just split off, go down another quarter. Then I don't get to see or explore
Mm-hmm.
because they're like, "Oh, we're just searching for the next stairs to the next level. Let's all split up and run through it." And it's like, how is that experiencing the dungeon at all? Like it's such a completely different thing. So it
Yeah.
forces you to kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to play this on my own so that I can experience it and try to get back to
Wasn't
that
Diablo
Diablo feeling.
2, didn't it rely a little bit on classes for some of the
Um,
like the bigger
they're definitely extremely different. Yes, the game play felt vastly different depending on your class.
but
Um,
it wasn't like you needed a class to get through a certain point. It was still independently single player, right?
yeah, yeah, it was just required some very much different tactics to
Okay,
do it.
yeah.
Um, where like the barbarian, right, was really good at handling melee stuff, and he jumps into the fray. But like if anything was ranged and you couldn't get to the ranged guy for whatever reason, you're getting slowed or crowd controlled, and a wizard was blasting you, like GG. So you sort of get in your mind like, okay, I need to be able to jump to the back line, take care of their controllers, and then deal with
Mm-hmm.
everyone. So like, but that's a mechanic and a mindset just if you're playing the barbarian. So like each class
Yeah.
really felt like you were inventing tactics specifically for that class. So it was pretty cool that way. Whereas I feel like that uniqueness isn't in Diablo 4 at all, where it's just like it doesn't really it didn't feel like it mattered.
I don't even feel like it
You just
mattered in
mash your
Diablo
buttons.
3 when I played. Because, I mean,
Yeah.
you had your like tornado mash them all to pieces, but that was really just kind of a visually different thing than my like monk clones that walked around and pulled
Right.
things
It
to,
just looked
pulled
different,
things
but
to,
it
it just looked
probably
a little bit differently. it was still like at the core the same fight mechanic. It just visually looked different, and I held a stick.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, that's
Oh my
interesting.
gosh. I remember when my Diablo 3 account got hacked and like I couldn't access it for a few months. And then when I got it back, there was this like high level monk in there with all this stuff. I'm like, all right, sweet.
Sweet, thank you.
Yeah. And then I ran around with him for a while. It was sick. Yeah,
I
they
don't think I
beat it
ever
like.
actually finished my monk build that I was going for at one point, which is sad. Oh well.
So I might when they do season 4, when they do this release, I'm tempted to try it again just because they put so much effort into it and like they're trying to promise that they've fixed some things. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, well, maybe I could give it a try. But like I don't know if they're doing anything specifically for players that are like me because they're just fixing the storage space problem and like a few other weird systematic problems.
Yeah, not really changing the gameplay itself by any means.
Right. Yeah. And so I'll still give it a try, but they don't realize that to save Diablo 4, they need to find a way to reach players that are like me that were having a much bigger problem with Diablo 4 as a whole and not just like a couple features in it. But that would mean
Yeah.
recreating a lot of the games. I don't think they can quote unquote save it necessarily, but maybe they can fix their reputation with the players that are still playing it, I guess, is all they're going for.
Yeah, I guess the question is, are new players joining Diablo 4, or is it just the old players? Because it seems like the choices they're making are for newer players that are used to the way other games work. But I wonder if that's actually working and if they're attracting new players, or if they're just continuing to upset their dedicated player base.
Uh yeah, I would think that they're still just trying to pander to like the people who are still playing it right now, that are complaining about things
Hmm.
and just trying to fix it for them. It sort of seems like they're facing the music of like, okay, this isn't for everyone, but like there's the people who are still interested and still complaining, but still playing, fixing the problems for those people. Whereas they're completely oblivious to why like such a mass amount of people just completely stop playing,
Yeah.
and they don't seem to have a real way of even of getting us to come back to play it.
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't know.
not sure. It'd almost have to be a new game.
It would. I think they boned it from the beginning.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, I completely stopped. I'm like, there's no way for them to even fix what they've done here. It's just a
Yeah.
different game that's not necessarily for me. It's not like a true Diablo game. It's something else. It's for a different group of people, and I hope they have fun.
Yeah. No fair.
I guess that's it. Is this sort of what you wanted to talk about? About let's see, when you were saying like a play style when approaching games,
A little
or is
bit,
that
but
something
a little bit
different?
different. A little bit different. We can jump into that.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
when I approach a game and think about playing it, my first thought is if it's multiplayer, can I play it by myself? Is there a way
Mm,
for me to play it by myself and have fun by myself? There's not. There's next to no way you're going to get me to play that game.
right.
Most, and I feel like I
I agree with
I
that.
I have learned that I don't play games at least anymore. I maybe did at the beginning, but I don't play games anymore for the social aspect.
Mm,
And I feel like a ton of people play it for the social aspect, whether they think they do or not.
right.
Because a lot of people will be like, "Well, I don't have friends to play with, but I still play." It's like, yeah, but you're having a lot of fun with the join random people and play as a group, even if you're not talking to them, like you're not in voice chat. There's still a
Right.
social aspect to that that I think you're really enjoying. And
Right.
I,
I
and
agree with
I
that.
I don't approach a game like that. I avoid that stuff like the plague.
Yeah.
And I think I'm a really unique gamer in that aspect of I don't do any of it for the social aspect.
I
Hardly
think
at all.
that uh I feel the exact same way. And the way I have of explaining it with a different example is with back when I was single.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like I was like, man, I just want to find a girlfriend, and and all this stuff. And like I was dating like crazy. I was like on like online dating stuff, and like I went
Mm-hmm.
on. There was this one year where, oh my gosh, I went on almost like two first dates every week. Like I went on hundreds of first dates, a lot.
Yeah.
Uh, and um, a friend pointed out to me that like, OJ, what are you doing? That's got to be so expensive. And
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, just anyway. They ended up telling me the philosophy of like, look, if you can't be happy alone, you will never be happy with somebody else.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, maybe you're right. So anyway, that changed the way I was living a bit there. But like, I think that's a really good example of like even in games too, like things if you can't find a way to enjoy the game playing it solo, you're not going to enjoy it playing with other people.
Yeah.
And that's
Fair.
how I felt that to be very true. Yeah, with any game, like if I can't enjoy this on my own, playing it with other people isn't going to make it better. And if it does, that means that's the core mechanic is playing with other people, making it a social game.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I guess that's one aspect I would um sort of judge a game on when I go into one. Another thing is like the competitiveness level of
Mm.
it.
Okay.
And like how competitive I have to be or aggressive I have to be engaged into it. Or that can be fun, but like I was broken as a young person to the
Okay.
point where all aggressiveness and competitiveness was like essentially just deleted. And
Fair.
I even remember the exact moment when it happened because like sure I had some like coaches and stuff in competitive leagues that were like really trash and made me hate being competitive. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember there was this one time I was hanging with a whole group of friends. We were playing this board game. I think it was is it Balderdash? I think that's the one where like there's a word and then everyone has to like write their own definitions for that word. And then someone who like they read out the word and then like read everyone's definition. Everyone votes on okay, which one's the real definition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was like really trying to get into it and win, and but we weren't even keeping score. And I'm like, I didn't understand why we weren't keeping score. It like was messing with my head. And I
Yeah.
realized my friends were just having fun writing down just the stupidest stuff and making each other laugh. I'm like, they weren't
Oh.
even trying to win. They were having fun losing. They were trying to write the stupidest thing, the worst answers possible, and trying to lose on
Yeah.
purpose just for the sake of having fun and being funny. And like it like altered my brain chemistry at that point. And I was like, oh, you can actually have more fun losing than winning.
Yeah.
Wow. And like ever since then, like all my like it was all gone. I was like, I have a new outlook on how to have fun now. It's just about doing funny and fun things, regardless of if it helps you to win or whatever. So when I go into a game, I start messing around immediately. I start seeing if I can jump. Can I roll? Can I climb on this thing? Can people stack on top of each other? And I
Mm-hmm.
start goofing off and seeing what level of creativity, what level of goofing off are they allowing in this game? Or are they railroading or like restricting all the actions down to like almost specifically like okay, you're only allowed to use your sword in this area, and like there's these huge invisible walls and you're not allowed to
Mm-hmm.
touch this mountain right here. So that's I think the biggest thing I go into it as is like how restrictive is the environment in the gameplay, and am I allowed to just goof off and have fun the way that I want to in this environment. So that's always like the immediate thing I do is I start goofing off, seeing what they're gonna do, what they're gonna restrict me on, and based on that, I go, okay, looks like they're gonna let me do whatever and try to build my own fun in this game.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
there was one of my most favorite memorable moments. younger was playing. I think it was Neverwinter Nights. It was a very old D&D based game.
Hmm.
Um, and I was going through a dungeon, and the end boss of this dungeon was this really powerful wizard, and I couldn't beat him. It's back in the game of like save
Yeah.
scumming essentially, so I had to save it and reload back in there, and like, okay, let's try this again. And I'm like, oh, I have an idea. It was so detailed that like there was these prison cells in an area back in the dungeon, and each prison cell like had a key to it, and you could lock the 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 door or unlock the door if you had the key to it. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna kite this guy back in here, trick him to go into one of these prison cells, and lock him in there. And it worked. I like aggroed him, made him follow me all the way back into this weird little prison cell. He came in, and he went in there, and then I ran out, closed the door, locked it, and he was trapped in there. And then I was able to like go back into the hallway and peek in and then shoot at him and like slowly, like he couldn't do anything about it. And I took him out. I'm like, there you go. So I was able to like completely use the environment, you be as creative, and invent my own fun and my own way of winning the
Hmm.
game. And to me, that was like one of the greatest moments when I figured out how to do this and win it. I'm like, this is the greatest game ever made because it let me do what I want.
Then you got to wonder, did you outsmart the game, or did they put that in there thinking or hoping someone would eventually try that? And it was like an intended cheese.
Maybe. I wonder.
Because you've got this weird thing that happens now with a lot of games where someone finds a cheese and then everyone complains about it being unfair, an
Mm.
unfair way to complete the boss or whatever, and so they patch it out.
Oh,
But then you have some people that like the devs eventually come out and talk about some of the older games, and they're like, yeah, this thing you guys all thought you were outsmarting us about, we put it there on purpose. We wanted people to eventually like think outside the box and try to do it this way. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, we weren't as we didn't beat the system like we thought we did as kids, but everyone has a laugh at it at the end. And
yeah.
I
That's
feel like I don't
funny.
see that very often in games anymore.
Yeah. I think that was a cool thing about Baldur's Gate 3 is that there was so much creativity. Like there was
Mm.
weird hacks, quote unquote hacks that people were doing that like you could knock someone out, store their body in a chest, and then like there was this thing you could do where you blow it up and it like yeets them to like a different act, and so you end up skipping a ton of the game. And like
Jeez.
so those were like glitches.
Yeah.
Um but like I don't think they patched that out. They're just like, cool. We want the players to have fun. And if this is how they're going to have fun, let them do it.
My favorite example of that is Hitman 3. Did you ever see
Oh,
gameplay of that?
I played Hitman 3. I was wondering if we are going to talk about this eventually.
Is the suitcase. Is that the
The
one you're thinking
suitcase?
of?
What?
This is my favorite thing in the world. So there was this glitch that could happen where if you threw the suitcase to hit somebody, but they started moving after you had activated the, like, because you know how you prep the weapon and
Oh,
it locks onto them and then you throw it.
okay, yeah.
Like if as you throw it they start walking away, the suitcase turns into like a heat-seeking missile
Like,
and will just like curve and follow them as it's like spinning through the air. And so like you like get people who are about to like hop onto a boat and like zoom off, and if you just throw it right before they get on the boat, it'll start chasing them and they'll zoom off on the boat and the suitcase will just follow them until it hits them. And it was the funniest glitch, and the devs thought it was, it was just so funny. It was creating so many funny clips. The devs thought it was so funny. They just were like, yeah, that just is now a permanent thing in the game. There's no way we're removing
yes.
that. It's so funny
Yes.
because you're like the serious hitman, and then you have this like heat-seeking briefcase that is just like chasing people like through the building. Like people would do things of like as they would set it off, they would trigger this as they would throw the suitcase. They trigger this other thing to like make the character like fall down into the building, and so like the suitcase is just like zooming through the building trying to get to this person as they're like.
I need to revisit Hitman 3, I think.
It's so funny, but they just like it's one of those things where they just like kept it because. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, you could say, "quote unquote," yeah, that's ruining the gameplay. It's like cheating. You shouldn't be able to hit them. But at the same time, it was like It's not hurting anybody. It's hilarious as hell.
Right. Leave it, man. Let us have fun.
It's so great. That's my
I remember
favorite
I
example of
was
that.
desperate for a stealth game for a little while, and then that came out. I was like, oh yes, let me
Mm.
play it. And maybe I didn't fit. I thought I played through all of it, but there was only like 3 or 4 levels that I could ever get to.
Well,
And
Hitman
it seemed
3
like
came
there
out
was
in seasons, didn't it? Or is that the
did
next
it?
one?
I don't know.
Well,
I
the whole
played
game.
Hitman 3 and there was like 3 levels and I beat all 3 levels and I was like, how could this be all of it?
Yeah, they did a weird model. I'm pretty sure it could have been the Hitman after Hitman 3, but I'm pretty sure it was Hitman 3, where they released the first act or chapters of things, and then the next year they released another expansion, which was the next like chapters of
So there
levels.
could be more to the game and I just need to go back because I loved it,
I
but it
think there
was
was three or
so
four.
short.
I think there was 3 or 4 editions, and so they were like their like idea was, okay, we're gonna give you three maps and stuff. We're still working on this stuff. We're gonna let you guys explore and like fully figure out all the achievements and all the different ways you can kill things, get all the cool different items, and we'll kind of learn from what you're doing to make any like last minute tweaks to these levels, and then we'll release these next set of levels for the next chapter. You bring all your stuff with you into this next area, and then you guys spend the next 6 months to a year figuring out these levels and playing them over. And I think they released 3. I think it was 3 chapters or whatever they called them. It could have been 4, but
Okay,
it was
yeah, it
like
seemed like very few.
it was a very weird model that everyone was kind of
I didn't get
confused
it.
about, and I think to this day people still don't know whether they liked it or hated it.
Yeah, I'm confused. I
Um,
remember there was the parts that I played were fun, but like it felt very short. And there was
yeah.
parts of it where like because it combined Hitman 1 and 2 in it too, so like you could go and like play Hitman 1 and 2 also because
Oh,
like
okay.
combined. And there seemed to be some sort of weird like live service thing that I didn't understand. I couldn't figure out how to even get into it and play it.
Because you had like the training boat, and then you had the mansion. I think were the in the first section of Hitman 3.
That sounds familiar.
Like
Yeah.
you had like the
Oh, I do
almost
remember
like
the mansion now.
or
Okay,
like the
yeah.
giant Playboy mansion party one
Yes,
where there's like some
that's
CEOs
right.
having some secret meetings that were like 1 year charges. But
There's
there was like
puzzles you had to like figure out to unlock
hmm
secret doors. Yeah.
and like the next one was like in a giant size skyscraper. Um,
Yes, there was like a party in a skyscraper that was happening.
and I can't remember what the other
There was also one where
levels
there was like just a
were.
big party going on. It was like a massive, like 1,000 people were at this huge party, and like I think it was a dam. No, no, it was like a winery because there's these big like vats of like alcohol, and you
Hmm.
used those to sort of
So I
yeah.
honestly don't know if you actually got the whole game, like you came in later after all the things were there and that was it, or if there's more to it that you could go back and get. I don't I don't remember how much of the game was released. I just remember it was like in phases and it was the weirdest thing in the world.
Jeez, yeah. See, like, what if you don't even understand? Like, maybe I'm just a boomer, and I'm like, I can only think in complete games.
I mean,
Like,
yeah. It
like, what
was
if you go to a game like Diablo 4 and you're like, you play it once and you don't understand the concept of a season and like there's going to be more content later and stuff like that, and you're just like, oh, I played it and beat it. And that's it.
yeah, and so the only people that would know about it are the people that really really love Hitman and are like watching all of like the Twitter and like the news posts about it. And then the people quote unquote like you will maybe accidentally hear about it and go like, oh yeah, that game, and try to go back to it or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
It was a really weird concept of releasing content.
Now I want to go look. I might reinstall that and go
I
have a
just know
look at
that
it because
each
it was
map
fun.
had like a ton of different missions you could do,
Yeah, like you
and
could
like a
replay the
gazillion different.
missions. There's like different objectives. You could like choose to do things in a different way and complete a different objective. So you could do the whole thing and win it in multiple different ways, for sure.
They also did a really cool thing that I really liked, and there was a few content creators that would play it every week. But I think it was every week they had essentially a special mission that you had. Okay, there's 2 different things. First one was you had one mission where you had one chance to try to beat it. You could exit out of the mission before you died, and try and start over again.
Ooh.
But as soon as you died, you lost.
Ooh.
And you would try to go in with your certain stuff, and you try to complete one of the old objectives, but with a specific way. Like they'd have a certain way you had to kill the
Okay,
target
yeah.
or whatever. But as soon as you
Right.
died, you you failed it that week, and you'd have to wait till the next week. And it was kind of like a
Oh.
really cool challenge. But then they added on top of that, and they did this thing where as and the people I watched played it as a group, but you would try to one up your mission. So you would do the mission. You had a base parameter: kill this person with a coconut or whatever. And
Okay, yeah.
then you'd go in. Okay, you had to kill that person with that coconut, but now you also have to do this. And you just slowly
Oh.
up the like amount of difficulty and things you have to do until you fail or someone on your group fails or whatever. And
That could be awesome.
it was a cool little, it like brought me back to like some of the like couch co-op kind of play feel where you're like a group of buddies playing on a couch, the game together, you know.
Oh
You're
yeah.
like handing the controller off to each person, you know, to try it this way or try it the other way, or like I think I can do it this time, and you're like,
Yeah, yeah, you're like, Miter, you're doing it
yeah,
wrong. Let me see it. Here,
yeah.
watch this. Yeah,
But
that's cool.
they had some cool
Um,
things like that.
the other thing I was thinking of was like sometimes games require like research.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's also sort of a determination whether or not I'll play it or at least how I go into it. I
Mm-hmm.
try to set my expectations correctly because I think League of Legends is one of those where like you can't just start playing not knowing anything about the characters or the items
Yeah.
because like or you get in there and you're like what even is all what like you're sitting there reading the whole time about your abilities and stuff. So I remember creating like my own little single player custom game with a bunch of bots just so I could sit there and read everything and read all of
Mm-hmm.
my abilities for a character and then go, okay, let's look at the items and read them out and then go, okay. Well, so I remember creating a spreadsheet like, hey, these are the costs of the items. And then at 6 minutes into the game, I will, on average, have this much gold, which means I could buy maybe this group of things. And so I started to create. This is before you could create your custom builds in the game. You had to have like this
Yeah.
extension outside the game that like would load your custom build into it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just went through a lot of work trying to figure out, okay, at this stage, I'll have whatever, 1,200 gold, and then I'll buy these three things. And then I go back to base. So, like, putting in that much research into it before even playing the game um, is something I sort of like, it's not necessarily discouraging, but like, I have to know if it's one of those games or not. And
Mm-hmm.
if it is, then I'm like, okay, I know that this isn't a game I could just jump into and have fun. This is one of those games where they expect you to like make a spreadsheet for it and like make a plan
Mm-hmm.
for it. And I feel like there are some games that like you don't know are going to be that way, but end up being that way. Um,
Yeah.
where
Fair.
like you get in there and you're like, how come? I feel like Path of Exile feels very much like this, where like if you just try to make your own build and just like go into it without a plan, you can't beat it. You can't get past a certain spot in there. You
Oh, really?
have
Like
to have,
campaign wise, you won't be able to.
yeah, it's just
Oh.
bad. Yeah. And there's a specific couple bosses that are very obvious that like they're there to prove that you've, at that point, you've created a good enough synergy in all of your abilities and items that you can continue on with the rest of the game. Like there's specific bosses that are
Interesting.
like those milestones that are like
Huh.
insanely harder to prove that you've actually created some sort of build that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so like that's a game that requires a bunch of like going on to like PoE builder and like testing out things and seeing what the output level are and looking at all the stats. So games like that aren't necessarily discouraging, but like if I start playing a game and I get to a point where like, how does anybody do this? And then I finally realized that like, oh, everyone's using one specific build. or oh,
Mm.
everyone's doing it this way, it almost ruins it for me. It's like now I've got to go back. Now I've got to start over because I started this wrong. And
Oh,
so
like it's that detrimental to the what you've already done.
yeah, like I can't keep playing what I've done. Like it's the end of the game for me and what I was doing.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's not just like switching up what you're doing. It's like all
You
the
can't.
progress you've done kind of stops you from. It's almost like you had to know that from the start.
Yeah, you had to have known it from. So like the skill
Oof.
tree in Path of Exile, it's insane. I don't know if you've ever seen it,
I've
but it's
had
like
glimpses of it. It's
it's
looked
probably like
extensive.
thousands of nodes that are all mazed out, and like if you like just go and pick like just the wrong node or two, and you only have so many points and so many ways to like reset those points that like
Hmm.
you could be locked into just wrong decisions and no way out of it. Yeah, so it's like, well, GG, I guess I'd have to start over or whatever. So figuring that out halfway through a game like that,
Yeah.
I'm like done. So when I do start a game and I start looking into it, I go, okay, is this one of those games where you have to start with an idea and a plan and a build and crap? Do I have to watch a dozen YouTube videos before I even start because everyone already has these metas and all this stupid stuff? So that's
Yeah.
I think that's something I consider when starting a game. And if it's too complicated, I'm like, you know what? Creating this build doesn't sound fun to me. I'll
Yeah.
pass.
Yeah. Yeah. If I start playing a game and I get to a point where I feel like the decisions I'm making are very permanent and
Mm.
will affect later on in the game, I will oftentimes do like a little search of like, are there some things I should know at the beginning of this game? Is there, I don't know, like some starting quote unquote rules I have to take into consideration when starting my game in this? Because yeah,
Right.
hitting that point is it does just kind of almost ruin the game unless you really loved it. It's like, well, I guess I'm not playing this anymore.
Right. Unless it was fun and you're like, you know what, actually, that could be a lot of fun coming up with
Yeah.
builds. It's not too complicated. An idiot like me can understand it. I'll try again. Path of Exile's that way. It's fun. For me, it's fun. It didn't
Yeah.
ruin it, but it easily could have.
Yeah.
Very easily could have.
I like it when a game doesn't make it required that you have to do that kind of research, only if you want to do something at a better or higher level. Like you could
Mm,
do the whole game just kind of winging it and doing your own thing, but like getting to the higher level or like doing things better requires that little bit of
mm,
like research and planning.
right.
I do
Like
like games like that.
that makes sense. Yeah, like Diablo 3 I felt was a little bit
Hmm.
like the nightmare dungeons, right? Like if you did things wrong, sure you could beat the game, but you don't stand a chance in the nightmare dungeons
Yeah,
and stuff like that at the end.
but it doesn't
What are the
require
nightmare
you to
chaos
restart.
dungeons? Are they
Well,
chaos dungeons?
no, it's nightmare mode or like
Okay,
I'm pretty sure it's nightmare.
something like that.
Well, no, I don't know. But yeah,
There was chaos involved for sure.
this is for sure something about a cow.
Um, the other thing I consider is like I'm really anal. Like I don't know if this is because I've had played so many games that like I'm getting to some sort of like diva status where like no, it has to
Okay.
be this specific way, or I won't play it. But I do start doing that a little bit, especially with
Hmm.
like when it comes to a shooter game, right? If it
You are
lets
very
me go into
specific about that.
first person, yes, I'm very specific. And because third person shooters, there's a lot of them that really frustrate me. It has to be done exactly right for me to not get motion sickness and
Hmm.
like to feel like I can do it well where where I feel like I'm still aiming from my perspective of where the reticle is. And you know, sometimes they put your character down the center a little bit lower or whatever.
Hmm.
And they have to get that whole trajectory and everything just right. Or like I get motion sickness and like I feel like I can't aim right. I feel like the character's in the way most of the time and I can't see on like half of
Hmm.
the screen. And so like as far as that goes, like that's also something I test out. Like right as I jump into a game, is like, okay, what perspective are we working with? Is if this is third person, I've got to run around, make sure that like I get the will they let me adjust the field of view?
Hmm.
There's games out there for whatever reason don't even have the field of view option, which is dumb. There's no reason for that not to be a thing. Um,
Yeah.
so I can see and feel like I can see and experience the whole way I want to see it and
Yeah.
everything. So that's another thing I get anal about. And like if it's like that, if it's any first person or third person shooter, one of the first things I do is go into the settings. Go, can I adjust the field of view? And I usually put it up to around 95. And if I can't, it's like I'm not even going to play this because it's just
Really?
wrong. Because it's this view scope is always just too narrow for me
Hmm.
most of the time.
That makes sense.
Oh, I just thought of something else I get anal about,
What
and
is it?
that's sound, the three-dimensional
Oh.
sound of things. I'm very picky about that. Destiny 2 does a bad job of it, and it drives me nuts. Even though we still have fun, it's like every time I get in there, I go, "Oh yeah, the sound in this game is so bad," because like I'm used to like I like to be able to hear exactly, like pinpoint exactly where sounds are coming from. If they're behind me, off to the side, which side.
Hmm.
But like Destiny, it's like they're doing something weird. Like sometimes you can tell it's from a side, but like there's sometimes where like it sounds like the thing is way behind you when really it's just right next to you.
Hmm.
And so something about it doesn't work right. And I can't quite tell what it is, but like I get so disoriented there because I rely on sound a lot. I don't know. It's just how I've always
Yeah.
played those kind of first person shooters is like I'm listening the entire time. If I hear anything, I know I have to know exactly where it is, and so I can quickly check it real fast. And so
For
the
me, it's that
sound,
there's so many sounds in that game that I get disoriented. That's the only time I feel
mm,
disoriented in that game when it comes to sound. Is because when
yeah,
you're in the middle of a fight, there are so many sounds happening.
there's a lot, and I think that's the problem because they don't put the sounds in the right spot.
Well, you
It
have
doesn't.
sounds like, for instance, you have the gun sounds. You'll often have a sound from where it's coming out of the weapon from the enemy and where it's hitting.
Mm,
And those often sound similar enough that
right.
it's hard to tell which one you're hearing, and that's when it gets disorienting for me sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I rely a lot on the mini map for that game.
Oh, okay.
But I can usually tell when a grunt is like right next to me. That's mostly because of my playstyle, and I'm usually like they're right in my face, and I often keep them around.
Right.
Like the things surrounding me, I usually keep them around for a while because they're helping me. So I don't know if that helped me get more used to the way they do the sound that way, maybe,
Okay.
but I don't know.
And
I don't know.
to
But I
oppose
know what you're
that,
talking about.
like a game like Left 4 Dead 2, right,
Hmm.
where we're as a survivors and you're going around, like any tiny sound is significant does significantly matter
Yes.
because you could hear the charger, right? If he's just
Hmm.
sitting over there grunting, you go, "There's a charger. It's actually right around there. It's over there." So even without seeing it, you know the sound came from just behind this corner.
Yeah.
So that's why things like that always matter to me, and I rely on them and expect them to be like that good all
Yeah.
the time.
That makes sense. Yeah, sound can make or break a game for sure.
It's weird because I don't think that's even talked about a ton, but it actually has such a huge
Well, it's talked
impact.
about a lot in competitive games,
Oh, okay.
especially competitive shooters. If sound design is off, like in Call of Duty or Valorant or things like that, people get upset. Like really,
Good.
really upset. Like if there's a glitch that's causing a footstep to not go off,
Ooh, yeah.
people will rage. And like to the point where I think that they just like some people get so upset about it to where it's like, well, the game's clearly not messing up that much. It's just you being a moron and not hearing it, or you messing up, or your headphones suck. Like some people get upset to it that like to that capacity. It's like, No, get over yourself. You just suck, or your stuff sucks. That's why you can't hear it. But like people still heavily rely on it and expect it in those kind of games. Like the ones
I
that come
think
off the top of my head are like Call of Duty, Apex, Valorant.
mm, and I used to think that those games just sucked, but actually maybe it's just because of the competitiveness of it that it turns me off. Maybe that's why I haven't been playing those.
They're very the reason I don't play them a
Mm.
lot is because it's not noob friendly.
Oh.
Like
Mm.
it's everyone just gets
Yeah.
so upset and mad at you because you've jumped in and you don't know anything yet. So it's like a game that you almost have to have someone escort you through and teach you before you can just play with other people.
Yeah. I remember trying to play Valorant once and like just trying to understand the abilities and stuff, and like I got kicked from whatever game I was in. Like I
Yeah,
think they like
same.
vote kicked me or something like that. I'm like, this is literally my first game, guys.
Yeah, I just started. Yeah, no,
Jeez.
I'm yeah, and it just
Um
completely stops me from playing those games. So it's like I
there's
don't have anybody that's going to be able to do that for me. So
there's another thing that I think it's not as significant, but it's very noticeable is uh like the hitboxes around terrain. And like when you
okay,
bump into stuff or like you're trying to shoot around a corner, but like your bullet is just like hitting like an invisible wall and you're like, wait, the corner's like a quarter of an inch to the right. How is it that my bullet going so close to the corner is actually hitting the wall? So when, or like another one I think happens a lot is like railings and shooting like you have a railing and then like the
mm,
bars in the railing, right, and trying to shoot through those, and then like usually that's one of the things I'll look for is like any sort of railing in the game and try to shoot through it to see how they handle it, because that's important, because I need to know where I can hide to try to shoot through it and what kind of stuff I can use as cover
mm-hmm,
effectively, because if I can't cover behind a railing and then still shoot through it, um
yeah,
right, then like then that means they can see. I'm not really even hiding. They can see me, but I can't shoot at that anyway.
yeah, no, that
There's
makes
all sorts
sense.
of things like that. And one of the things that I think maybe it was on purpose and maybe it was kind of funny was in Destiny 2, where they have a lot of uneven ground. And so like if there's like just too much of an uneven ground, you can't even like step over that space.
You
You have
have
to
to
jump
jump.
over it. You
Yeah,
have to jump. And
yeah.
it's like, how is it that my character can't just walk over this ground that's like, this step is like 6 inches tall? I can't just walk up this. I have to jump.
Yeah.
It's real, right? I'm not
No,
crazy.
no, it does happen on certain terrains where like you'll be in a spot and you'll do kind of the waddle where you're kind of sidestepping trying to avoid damage, or you like walk a
Yep.
circle, and if you do it in the wrong spot, you'll just be caught, and you're like,
Yep.
wait, hold on, trying
And you look
to
over, there's no wall there. And you're like, what am I hitting on? And if you look down, it's like this little lip.
yeah, this like step that you for some reason can't go up and down. There's a specific mission where it happens to me all the time, and it drives me absolutely nuts because
Drives me crazy.
you do just sometimes get caught on those. There's not a ton,
Yeah.
but there are definitely a lot of several situations where it happens.
There
It's
was also
ugh.
one the first raid we did in Destiny 2, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
never forget this because it killed me so many times. Where like it was close to I think it was the second to last room where like you had to do the whole obstacle course that goes around
Mm-hmm.
the whole outside thing,
The
but like we
gauntlet.
had like three different platforms and like there was like an edge you could fall off down into the abyss. Well,
Mm-hmm.
part of it was like you had to jump to. You had to jump up to this thing and jump back down. But on the ground was like this little nub on one of the corners. And if you land on this nub, you don't just land on it. You can't just land on it and stay there.
Yeah.
It pushes you in a direction. And
You
it almost
just
seemed random every time.
you
So
slid
it was
off of it.
so dangerous to land on this little nub because it just yeet you off into the abyss and you're dead. And it's like no one's allowed to die that entire mission. And there
Oh
were so
yeah,
many
that
times where
one's
that's what killed me.
yeah. Oh man, that raid was so much fun. Yeah, there's a lot of little.
So hitboxes in terrain is one of those things that I'm always very aware of, trying to figure out how they've managed to do it in a game, so at least I can compensate for it.
Yeah, no fair.
I don't know if it's a deal breaker necessarily, but that's definitely one of the things that controls how I view a game.
Mm,
A lot
no
of these have
fair.
just been first person and third person game. I prefer those. When we start playing
Yeah.
games that are like um sort of a top down perspective,
Mm-hmm.
that are like RTS almost based. I don't know. I just don't enjoy those quite as much.
I still really love StarCraft.
StarCraft.
I still really love it. Every time I play it, I have a blast. Just like the regular game, like not even like the going into like the arcade stuff that we do, but just like the regular base game is just so much fun to me. I don't know what it is, but it's also one of those games where you can quite competently not have a build and do just fine. But it's
Hmm.
also really fun to like figure out a build and try to get really good at it. Like I at one
Right.
point had like um a piece of paper I had written on that just like step by step. Okay, after I do this, I have to do this. After I do this, I have to do this. And like got to the
This is
point of
me
like,
barracks.
okay, at this point I have to be like at this point of my base, have an SCV here so that I can do this quickly or whatever. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah. No, that I remember going through. I remember playing against like creating a custom game and going, okay, how does the beginner AI work? Because I suck. I suck at
Mm.
RTSs really badly. And so I'd play it and then I'd watch the replay of it and then just watch what the AI did and go, okay,
Mm.
I'm going to try to mimic that. And then I got to the point where like I could beat him. So take his build and then like improvise it. Like, okay,
Yeah.
let's do the next difficulty. And so that's how I learned how to play StarCraft.
There you go. There you go.
Was doing it that way and learning that, oh, it matters what order to do these things in for your economy and all that sort of stuff. But that's really hard to keep track of all that stuff and like what stage you're in your build and like what, because like if something
Yeah.
happens that throws you off and you have to improvise, then go, oh crap, how it's all over now. I missed one step.
Everything's broken.
How do I how do I make up for it? That's where I was
Yeah.
just my brain. I have brain rot and I can't figure it out.
Yeah, I always did the thing where I would have a opening build. I think is what
Mm,
the term was. So like a build up to a certain point, and at that point you have like a style you're going for, but it's kind of more it's less structured or whatever. So like after you got to a certain point, it's like okay, I'm going for like base first or barracks first, or like am I trying to go for the like bio units really quickly, or am I trying to go for the mech units really quickly? And then as soon as you got to a certain point, you were like doing a specific play style with like okay, in general I'm using these kind of units, and then it became the fun rock paper scissors game for me of like okay, what are they
oh yeah,
using against me and trying to figure out how to counter it. Not that I was amazing at it, but I think I did decently at the game.
I never got close to that. It was always just like try to do a specific build order, and if it goes wrong, it's over.
No fair. And StarCraft 2 specifically was way faster paced than any of the other RTSs, which I think rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, to where
Hmm.
they didn't enjoy it as much. I think they liked the much slower paced, maybe a little bit easier to recover type of games.
Right.
Things like Warcraft and StarCraft 1.
Yeah, I liked Warcraft 2 a lot better. Wait, was it Warcraft 3? Sorry.
Warcraft 3, yeah.
Frozen Throne. Yeah. Cuz that is the right pace for me, I think. I can deal with that one better.
A little bit slower paced. If something bad happens, there's enough time for your allies to really get to you. And because the game pace is slower, you can recover a lot easier
Right.
after you've kind of been wiped out but then saved. Whereas
Right.
StarCraft 2 was a lot more. As soon as you fall behind, it's a
Mhm.
lot harder to catch back up because of just how quickly everybody else is moving and progressing.
Okay, so World of Warcraft,
Hmm.
it's safe to say that that was based on at least the gameplay was based on an RTS.
The story was based off of the RTS.
Right. But even like the perspective and how things work, it was like it evolved from the heroes to the
Hmm.
point where like you're controlling a hero and that's it, and then you go down and you select and attack specific units and stuff like that. And it seems like that's how it evolved, was from an RTS into
Yeah.
whatever World of Warcraft is now, which is an MMO. But I'm curious, is that what an MMO actually is? Is in order for something to be an MMO, does it have to be that sort of top-down perspective at all? Did World of Warcraft truly define what an MMO is, or people who call things an MMO are expecting it to be like World of Warcraft?
I think it used to define it. Now it's a lot more loosey goosey.
Mm,
I don't know whether I like or hate that because, in my opinion, in the way I've always viewed the term MMO, it's like
mm-hmm,
okay, then it's like Warcraft. It's like World of Warcraft.
mm,
It's a game of that kind of style where you have a bunch of abilities at the bottom of the ground. You kind of move to
okay,
where you're going to attack. You press the attack button, and the thing does it. And the only thing you're doing with your character is to maybe move them out of the hit zone and move them back, or
right.
things like that. Otherwise, you're really kind of just kind of hitting the different numbers,
The
and maybe
different numbers,
clicking and maybe clicking a little bit. You know,
and you have a macro running that hits them
there's
in the
no
right
like
order.
maneuverability or like movement skill
Right.
based with the game. There's a little bit of like knowing when to move out of like the hit zones and like avoid attacks and stuff like that, obviously. But
Okay. Okay.
that was always, in my opinion, that's an
That's what
MMO.
an MMO is.
Yeah.
Because I never played World of Warcraft when it first came out. Like I tried it once
Hmm.
later on, much later on. And I was like, this is an MMO. This isn't anything like an MMO. Because my perspective was way different. I think the first MMO that I played was probably Firefall, which is a shooter game. But like everyone's all in the same world running around. There's world bosses and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
my idea of an MMO is just um, a world environment where everyone is there together and can interact with the same environment at the same time,
Yeah.
regardless of what the perspective or anything and the mechanics were. But it was
Which
so weird to me to see like people going, no, it's only an MMO if it's like World of Warcraft. And then like, no, an MMO is just like a massive multiplayer online. Like you just have a massive bunch of
at
people.
its core, that's what it is. Yeah. Just like any game where it's like all the players are together in like a massive online world.
And so like I've seen arguments and stuff online like whether or not something is an MMO or not. And it's like one person's like sees it as, oh, is this game like World of Warcraft? But the other person's like, well, is it a massive multiplayer online? And so like they're arguing their different sides, realizing that they have completely different definitions of it.
And
It's
then it
just
comes
funny
into
to
the
see
point,
those things.
yeah, it is. And then it comes into the point of like, well, at what point do you consider it to be a big world that we're all existing in? Because like, is Destiny 2 an MMO? I mean, it could be very easily argued yes, and
Hmm.
at the same time, very easily argued no. I I think I'm in the wrong in the way I view MMOs. To be clear, I
Okay.
think I'm in the wrong. It was just like it's kind of like how you have like brands
Mm,
like Band-Aid. It's an adhesive
okay.
bandage,
Right.
but I call them all Band-Aids.
Okay. Okay. I see.
And so I just kind of attached the gameplay and style that World of Warcraft is to the term MMO. And in my little universe that I existed in growing up in gaming, when you someone said the word MMO, they were talking about the World of Warcraft style of gameplay.
I see.
Otherwise, it was well, that's an online, that's a multiplayer game. That's like an online multiplayer game. That's not an
Okay.
MMO. That's an online multiplayer game.
Well, I guess that's true
which
too.
is, which
So
is just kind of bastardizing the term MMO a little bit. But
it is. So the fact that like okay, back to Destiny 2, the fact that you can only have squads of whatever, 3, 4, sometimes 6,
yeah,
depending on what you're doing, and that you can't have a massive amount of people fighting in the same
but you
dungeon.
can go into a world, go onto a planet,
Oh, that's true.
and there's a ton of
Okay,
people
that's
there.
fair.
So like by
I
definition,
forgot about that.
by like the core definition of what MMO actually means,
Yeah.
Destiny 2 is an MMO.
Those parts do satisfy it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. It's technically an MMO, and you're just going into raids and dungeons when
Yeah.
you go into an event where it requires 3 people, or
Okay.
you're like limited to 3 people. Otherwise, it's an MMO, and you're just running around with a bunch of other people who are playing. But at the same time, it's like, but it
But
doesn't have
okay.
the feel of like what
But
most
it's
people
not
think
the
of an MMO.
RTS. It's not because the love of the original those MMOs comes from a love of RTSs. I feel like it's like derived from it, of like that sort of perspective and selecting things, selecting units, and you have your abilities
Being
that
the
are
third
just
person you're
numbers.
talking about, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. But also like even controlling a hero, right? Is just like there's just a couple numbers. Like you just show up, you select a target, you press a button to activate your ability. Like I felt like that's what the heroes in World in Warcraft 3 were,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels like that's what it purely derived from. So I
Yeah,
wonder if it's just a love of that that sort of makes people fall in love with that style of MMO.
maybe. Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, are you talking about why that's called an MMO, or are you talking about why people like it?
I think why people prefer that as the what MMOs are, because that's what MMOs are to them, and why they love that style the most is because they truly just love. It
Maybe,
comes
but
from
I
their love
I think
of.
it's because World of Warcraft was the first real successful one, like massively uh,
Oh, okay.
successful MMO. I mean, I'm sure thousands of people would argue against me on that fact, but I think in terms of pure reach, World of Warcraft was the first super successful MMO, and the first super successful thing of a thing. It kind of defines the term
Okay.
to a certain
Okay.
degree.
Do you think World of Warcraft kind of almost stands on its own as a thing? Because I don't know. I just maybe it's
Kind of
because I never
stands.
really played it.
I
I,
I just
from
think
my
it was like one of
perspective,
the firsts.
it seemed like it wouldn't exist. It doesn't have its own leg to stand on without the RTS Warcraft 3. That
Nah, I
it's
disagree with that.
okay.
I think it gained its initial popularity because everyone loved the World of Warcraft 3
Hmm.
and
But it does
wanted to
stand
like
on its
dive.
own.
Yeah, I think it's its own stands on its
Okay.
own.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
I just think everybody loved diving into that world more, and then it very quickly became its own independent thing.
Interesting.
Like I think if you talk to a lot of World of Warcraft players,
Mm-hmm.
they hate playing RTSs.
Oh.
I don't think they would like playing them.
Okay. That's not at all what I had thought.
Yeah, I don't think any of them would like playing Warcraft 3 or StarCraft.
Huh. Interesting.
Just
Okay.
because, yeah, just the way you're interacting with the game and on like on a higher skill level playstyle, you're moving really fast and you're moving through macros really fast in RTS. Your screen is never just at a point for more than like 2 seconds.
Oh, right, right. Okay.
When you get to like the real higher gameplay levels, which I was nowhere near. I moved pretty quickly through the screens, but I was nowhere near that. But like you're like jumping around at things, your macro, you're thinking of 10 different places on the map. Whereas in Warcraft, you're like on one screen, focused on one place. Sure, you're kind of doing the same like third person perspective, clicking around on the screen, but you're not jumping
Hmm.
around dealing with macros and micros and stuff like that.
Interesting.
From my view, at least.
Okay.
And
That
so, But
That
like,
my,
or
my experience was like when I played it the one time, I was like, oh, all this is a like zoomed in to heroes in Warcraft 3. It's just a very much zoomed in and deeply explored version of just the heroes, and that you're creating your own Warcraft 3 hero. And it felt like almost the same sort of play of playing a hero. And maybe I'm just thinking of
I
like
can
the
understand that.
custom matches, the custom games where like you did use heroes, like the Dota
Dota style,
sort of
yeah.
situation, and like it just like in my mind when I played World of Warcraft, it just mapped straight to that, and I go, oh, this is just that, but
More
magnified.
detailed. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's fair.
but okay, interesting.
Hopefully, you guys
Um,
enjoyed that episode.
yeah, that was fun. There's a lot of interesting things that like I really do get anal about when I play games. I'm
Yeah,
like, I will just jump in and just like go through this list of checklists and like this, that. Okay. And like almost immediately have an opinion of what's going to happen and all the expectations.
yeah. I don't think I'm
But
quite like that, but I do have things I check to make sure it's going to be something I like.
I'm a little bit of a diva. I want all my M&Ms to be green.
Yes, in your
Okay.
nice little green room as you arrive.
Yes. All right. Again, this is also available on Spotify. There's a link down somewhere. Click all the buttons and bye.
Bye.